Hello. So this is Lisa Westhoff, and my group has been discussing bicycle-friendly communities and doing some research on that. So I live and work in Grand Junction, Colorado, on the western slope of the Rocky Mountains. The city has a population of about 60,000, and the entire Grand Valley population is over 100,000 people. So I discussed policy, politics, and Grand Junction with Jerry, who's been involved in the political arena for over 10 years. He served for 3 U.S. senators and currently works with National Parks and Conservation Association, which is a nationwide organization that works with the national parks. They do a lot of governmental lobbying and political work for them. He is on the board of the Housing Authority in Grand Junction also, and the homeless shelter for Grand Junction. So he really knows policy and he knows the Grand Valley like the back of his hand. Because of his experience, I wanted to talk with him on some more broad policy questions to help me gather more insight on how to enact change on a political and policy level. So first I asked what methods he has found most successful in changing policy through his long and vast list of experience. And he gave me 3 points: vision, leadership, and collaboration. So he really said that you must have a vision and understand the long-term goals that you have set out to accomplish and not get weighed down by the short-term goals and even pitfalls that you may experience when trying to enact policy changes and just new policy in general. When it comes to leadership, he immediately said you must have the leadership ability to disrupt and make change, which really kind of stood out to me, the disruption part, but made sense when he said that, because a lot of times you're making change that could be making waves. There's going to be individuals that aren't going to want the change or the policies to happen that you maybe have a vision for. You must be able to innovate and believe in your leadership skills. As a leader, you have to be thick-skinned, resilient, and intelligent. You can't phone it in when you're trying to enact change. You've got to know what you're talking about. And lastly, you have to collaborate with those in favor and against your vision. You must be a good listener and be willing to get into the dirt. Collaboration brought us right into my next question about how he has been able to bring 2 opposing sides together. And not really surprising, he said compromise. He really talked about how you have to be passionate about your vision, but not always take it personal whenever people oppose your vision, or let personal attacks stop you from achieving your vision. In order to compromise, you must be able to listen to your supporters and your opposition and present the information in terms or terms in ways that speak to both groups. So with the very little experience I've had with just some advocating for things, it's really easy to talk to the people that support and agree with you, but it's very difficult to talk to people that oppose you and try to convince them otherwise. And so you have to be able to speak their language and know what they're going to find positive about the vision that you have. What part of your vision is going to make a good impact for them and make their lives better? And that is probably going to be different for various groups and different, especially for those that support you and for those that oppose you. And so through that ability to find that compromise for both groups, then you can bring those 2 together and help to make your policy and changes a reality. You've got to be able to change your information to suit the audience that you're discussing or talking with. You also need to know your audience or community. In some settings, you may be more aggressive or you may need to be more moderate. He gave the example of PETA and how they throw red paint on individuals wearing fur coats and how they use this to get their message across. But a similar organization, the Humane Society, which is also against, animal cruelty and things like that, more specifically in our community, isn't going to take it as an aggressive stance or reaction to like PETA does, as in throwing red paint on people, because they're not going to have a good impact with such aggression. They're not going to be taken well, and their message is going to get lost. So you've got to really know your audience and the community, and know when you need to be more aggressive and kind of more on the attack, and when you need to be more moderate. Because if your message isn't being heard, then you're not going to be able to get anywhere with that. Jerry also made a really great point about knowing your time frame for change. It's important to continue pushing for policy change, but you have to be strategic about it. Will the policy change be more likely to pass now or later? This can be difficult because as advocates, you want to see the change now, but it may be more successful if they step back and look at the demographics and the current climate of the community. Maybe waiting to put a policy change up for vote on a city council or a city-wide or county-wide or statewide ballot would have a more positive outcome if you waited. So you have to be flexible. And again, that comes back to you've got to do the legwork and get down in the dirt and research and find out everything about your vision. So you've got to know the background of the policy you're trying to change or implement. Has it been attempted before? What was the success of those attempts? You learn from failures and successes of those before you. He also talked about knowing your demographics and community norms. Look at your communities who are similar in size and have similar political backgrounds, because this can help you choose the right methods for educating citizens and lobbying and campaigning. So, for example, in Grand Junction, I'm not going to look to Boulder, Colorado, which one is much larger and has a totally different demographic. And their political demographic is very opposite of ours. They are very progressive political stances. They enact change quickly and sometimes more aggressively than even those who are progressive would prefer. But Grand Junction is not that at all. So you're not going to look to them for examples of how they lobbied and campaigned to achieve policy changes. You're going to want to look at a community that's more similar. And then, as we talked on, a phrase that really stood out to me as Jerry and I were discussing different policy changes and how to do that is he said that hope isn't a tactic. I had asked if we, being citizens of Grand Junction, could hope for more progressive changes like walking and bicycling paths, since a recent tax increase for schools had passed last year. And he said, you shouldn't have hope in politics. You shouldn't have hope in politics. Hope isn't a tactic. And being a person who has little experience with political policy, I really feel I'm often naive, but I'm learning and understanding more, and you really have to have the facts and a plan. You can't just go into it hoping that you're just going to save everything and you're going to be great and everything's going to come out just the way you want it. Because you may find that your community or things need a different policy change than what you're trying to enact. And maybe you have to be more flexible and change that. But you've got to go with facts and a plan. You can't just live on hope and a prayer. So unfortunately, in our city, in Grand Junction, bicycling and walking paths are scarce. We are not a bicycle-friendly community whatsoever. There is little planning for a comprehensive plan, and there is a lot of resistance to even the planning of it. Despite the large biking community, there are more mountain biking trails outside of town than I can count, yet the bicycling paths in town are hit or miss, and even in the newer sections of town, the availability of sidewalks or even a shoulder on busy roads are scarce, and it's very dangerous to be on your bike or walking. There are, unfortunately, a lot of it is the political climate that is where the resistance comes from. There are really deep-rooted political ideologies that inhibit growth and improvement for walkable and bikeable community in Grand Junction. City council members really lack a grasp of economic improvements, of how a comprehensive network of bike paths could offer the community. The existing biking community is viewed as an expensive luxury for the weekends or for individuals who cannot afford a car. So it's really one extreme to the other. Either you own a $10,000 mountain bike or road bike and you do this as a luxury because you have the expendable income, or you own a bike because you cannot afford a car or you don't have a driver's license. So, for example, of how our biking friendly community is not existent, there's this riverfront trail in the Grand Valley. It's a biking, walking, running path that's paved, and it's taken over 30 years, and it's still not complete. It's not a priority. There's a very strong conservative political ideologies that view compromise and collaboration with advocacy groups for biking-friendly communities as a weakness that could lead them to lose their political footing. And they often oppose any type of these changes or improvements and policy initiatives without a thought. It's automatically a no. So after we talked about the lack of an initiative and support from political powers in the area, I asked Jerry if he is optimistic for change and how do we achieve change and improvement for a bicycle-friendly community. So thankfully, he is optimistic, thank goodness, but he's not optimistic about the political powers. His optimism really lies with the community and citizens. The political policy change won't be voluntary. It will happen despite the elected officials in Grand Junction. They won't have a choice because the businesses and other partnerships in the valley will have more power and clout to make the changes happen. So if advocacy groups for bicycle-friendly communities and comprehensive plans for bicycle paths and walkability paths can present their vision and long-term plan to these stakeholders and demonstrate how a bicycle-friendly community can increase business profits on a monetary level, increase housing prices, and make our community a more desirable place to live, they can enact policy changes in spite of the political powers that be. So our neighboring town of Fruta is a great example of this. They are also a very conservative town, but they have, over the last few years, taken some more progressive stances. And one of those definitely happens to be in the bicycle community, the mountain biking community in particular, and they have really taken on that identity. And you can visibly see a difference in their town in the 10 years that I've lived here. Their median housing prices are even above that of Grand Junction's now, despite the fact that their town is considerably smaller, lacks the amenities that Grand Junction can offer. Also the jobs, it's more of a commuter town. A lot of people live in Fruita and work in Grand Junction, and they're only about 10 miles away from each other. So they're really a great example of how policy changes can make a difference. And they are a community that Grand Junction can look to for examples of how they can enact policy change, because we have a similar political environment and the demographics are similar. Fruita may be a little bit smaller than Grand Junction, but you also have similar populations that live in both places, and you have people that live in Fruita, work in Grand Junction, and now, because Fruita has improved a lot of their economy, there are individuals who go to enjoy the amenities and restaurants that Fruita can offer now because their town is growing. So hopefully Grand Junction will be able to look to them for examples, and we can improve our bicycle-friendly community.